Another watercolor tutorial by Andrew Broussard. Just getting everything organized as per usual. Here I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge aqua. I'm gonna get it all soaked with my medium Ron Ranson Hake brush, and as this absorbs the water, we'll talk about the plan for this painting. Okay. So we have our palette. I'm trying to make it so that you guys can see the palette more throughout the video and see the mixing that's taking place. That unfortunately shifts me a little bit to the side, but I could shift you all this way and still give myself room. I'm not sure if it casts a shadow from that tripod, but let me know what you all think, and if that helps you, see what I'm doing better. All right. So I don't think I'm going to try anything crazy palette-wise. I may utilize more, utilize some Pthalo Blue in this painting. I haven't used that in a while, and the reason I want to use that is for darker greens. I added Pthalo Blue, well, I had Pthalo Blue, and I added it to my palette whenever I started reading James Fletcher Watson. I'll say that again, James Fletcher Watson. He had quite a few painting books available. He was a British painter. And Ron Ranson, he usually had just one blue on his palette. And then Ron Ranson eventually added cerulean blue. James Fletcher Watson had two different blues from the beginning, or at least throughout his whole book series. And then I think added maybe a third. And the whole purpose was for, I think the Pthalo Blue was for the greens, while the Ultramarine was for purples. So they had a different role within the palette. Anyway, so I'm going to use that for I'm going to try to get some dark greens. I am going to rely on lemon yellow. I'm going to put a little bit more on there. And that'll probably be all that really switches up with this one. The main goal, I don't really have a composition planned. I rarely do, but the experiment here is, and I should have drawn pictures, but I have to get ready for to put on powerlifting practice in about an hour and a half. So for this one, I'll just have to kind of explain. I was looking through an art book, and I believe it was Thomas Moran's art that I was looking at, and he was a landscape artist. And what I was really drawn to was not so much the trees, but the holes within the trees and what you could see through them. And I was thinking about putting a nice light sky in, and then having those dark trees over it, but being able to see the lighted field through the trees, the lighted sky through areas of the trees. So I'm thinking here I'm going to have one of those midway and another closer tree up on this side, and having a fork in it just so I can experiment with seeing the field between it. I did a painting like that recently. It's up on the Etsy account. I think I called it like End of the Path, or Through the Path, or Path's End, where it was from a photo that I had taken, and there was a lit field behind the line of trees. So it's a more exploration of that I don't know if you would call that a compositional effect or what, but that's what's on my mind. That's what we're going to go with. So a little bit of alizarin. I'm going to do a very light sky. Raw sienna. Ultramarine. And I'll give everything a tug. A little bit of Payne's gray in the sky, just see if that'll show through in the end. But I really just don't want to do much with the sky. I'm going to keep it at that. I'll use my Venetian red, ultramarine, for a little purple. This will be the far horizon line. Now this is something that I also want to be able to see through those tree holes as well. I figure I could add variety to it. Mix a little burnt sienna into that, bring that closer. And I'm not too concerned about like what this is, if it's a rolling hill or if it's a little bit more ultramarine, or if it's like just a tree line or something. I just am wanting to have this far distant shape and seeing how it'll show up through. I'm just going to work my way forward with I was thinking about lemon yellow and the raw sienna. I may have to scrape some sort of path into this, or I may just leave it blank and let it just be a field. But this is what I want us to be able to see amongst and behind those trees. Now you can imagine that it's a field of flowers, and if you have the same intensity of that lemon yellow, I believe it was Carlson that said, if you have that yellow back there, or any intensity back there, if you want to have it in the foreground as well, to in a larger, more dominant state, to help create that depth, if you so choose to have that yellow back there, or green or red or anything like that. Okay. So usually I do the wet and wet, but I feel that it might be necessary to do a dry off and then put everything over this. I could do a third far distant one to see how that affects it, and we'll do that first. We'll just use the rigger for it. Since it's going to be so far distant, I'm going to still use my ultramarine, and I'm going to use that light red. So it's that same combination I used for that far distant, but it'll be in higher concentration. So these will be far distant line. The next line of trees will be about here. So we could say that this is an experiment with perspective, aerial perspective, atmospheric effects, and compositional shapes. So I guess this, that. So that'll be our first line. That'll dry quite a bit. I am in the wet and wet stage, and I do like to put a little bit of shadow in where I'm working. So let's take a little bit of ultramarine. I'll put that in to establish where the base of those trees are going to be. And then the closest experiment one will be about here. And they're going to cast their shadows. And I could take this towel. This towel's wet. I don't know what I used it for. And wipe out a path. And maybe we'll come back in and paint a gray. Alright, so let's dry this off. Okay, it's not completely dry, but it'll suffice. I really want you all to see the Pthalo Blue. The camera might be refocusing, but I always think of it like a Vicks Vapor Rub mentholated type blue. I think this was invented in the, I don't know if it was the 30s or 40s. But it's really strong. It's a staining pigment. And here it is mixed with the burnt sienna, ultramarine. Sorry, I don't know why I said that. Raw sienna. You kind of get a green effect with that. And you can mix the other earth tones in it to change the direction of it. And I could also take my burnt umber and mix that here. So that shows you the darks and the greens that we can get from that. It's been a while since I utilized it, but I mean, you can see the benefits, I think, right there. But you just have to, it's a very overpowering pigment, so you just have to be careful with it. And I mean, not timid, just play with it. So the idea is, I'm gonna have a line of trunks here. Let's put those in. So I want to be able to see these guys. I'm going to try to put variety of color value and tone in there, hopefully, with the field behind it. So we're going to have the grass at the bottom, where it started putting that shadow in. And I don't know how well the green shows through on this, but you could see that you get a green from this. We might have to dry brush a mixture with our burnt, our ultramarine as a shadow. Oh, I splattered a whole bunch of paint, but that's fine. Now, the thing to focus on here, and I've mentioned this before, is to vary the distances between tree shapes. We don't want that same pop, pop, pop. We want pop, 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 pop. We want a variation there. And as you can see right here, we can see the field behind it. We can see those, let's call it far rolling hill behind that as well. And then that variates behind it by tapering. So we have a lot of interesting pattern changing taking place with just a simple few brushes. And it's doing what I want it to do. Now, I'm going to have to make interesting foliage shape as well. So let's go back to our hake. And this is just using different mixtures of that Pthalo Blue with the earth tones, earth pigments. But I pre-mixed them, and now I'm just grabbing a little bit more. And I want to do a variety in height and shape and density with these as well. I'm going to lead this off the paper since we're going to have a mat covering it. That's going to help it appear to continue. Get a little bit more. Let's grab raw sienna. This is a more burnt umber now. I can add textural strokes up. That gives us a variety in there. You can scrape in here. We can also splatter over this. Not sure if I have the brush wet enough, but or water enough. Let's splatter in there. I don't usually splatter with the hake, and as you can see, this is probably why I don't really get much from it. So let's switch to the rigger. We'll just use the rigger to splatter. There we go. Now that we have the rigger out, just create those weaving branch patterns, have branches come out, tie everything together. Okay, now we'll let that kind of hang out, and we'll come back and take a look, see if there's anything we want to do with it. This is where we can then experiment with the dabbing of the paper towel. We could experiment with scraping in here, getting more texture and whatnot. Anything you want to do to get that, but we're able to get that view through there. Now I wanted a closer tree. I think I might switch to the hake for this one. We'll start right here. I'm going to want it to branch off low. Sit down. feel a little darks on the outside edge. So in hindsight, I think I would have made this tree a little bit narrower, so I didn't have to extend off the page with the size of it. I would have shifted these back a little bit further and shrunk their size. But like I said, the main goal was to see that effect that would take place. Okay, so we put the trees in, and we could play with that as much as we want. But now I want to wipe that Pthalo Blue off the palette, grab some Ultramarine, tone it down, gray it down with some burnt sienna. And let those guys cast their shadows. Let this guy cast his shadow. Then I could take light red, Venetian red or light red, whatever one works for you. You could either mix that with that ultramarine for a purple, but I think if you mix it with the raw sienna, we could get more of a terracotta type color and put in like a stone type path. We could allow it to switch over by using the ultramarine to make it more purple as it goes back. Extend that back there. You can add variation in the foliage. I'm gonna go to the store after practice and grab more paper towels. What else did I want to do with this one? Kind of just is a mid-ground, foreground painting with some depth to it. There's a lot of things that we could add to make it interesting. We could start adding people, or we could add fence posts. You can change it up by scraping out that fence post coming up front. And whenever you put fence posts, it's been a long time since I put those in a painting, but put their shadows and their growth down below. The fence on the other side. I wonder if we could put some idea of cows in there. I feel like it would have to just be more dots than anything. figure the only thing you could really do is, or at least the only thing I could think of doing, is varying the tone in these shapes as if they're laying and standing. I have really no experience with cows, like painting them, so this is just me winging it. And maybe that's a good thing. It's just to think about how I would just imagine it. You know, they would cast a little bit of shadow. They'd be in groups. I mean, I see them all the time. I don't know if we'd be able to see them through the trees. We could put some ideas back there. We could dry it off and put people walking. Because of the height of the fence posts, these people aren't really going to be that tall. It's going to be a pretty large lane that they're walking through. Grab some light red. Grab some ultramarine. See if we just get a variety of color on them. You can then give them a dog. Maybe they have a little kid walking with them. You know, there's a little family going for a walk. They got the cows on either side. They're bringing their dog. That's their story, and I'm sticking to it. So, let's see. So overall, we experimented in here to be able to just see a field behind it. We experimented here with openings to be able to see it, so that that view took place. We had put this far distance in, and we see it radiate back here, which is interesting. We had to create a path with the eye, put some people in, put some cows in. I think in hindsight, I could leave it super experimental and like left it just that hazy field, but you know, that's a decision you'd have to make instead of trying to cows or anything like that in there. I could have also have taken some lines and made it for a field for crops, and I would have to be working with perspective to see those lines, and I could have actually had that rolling and had different areas where there were different spots. And this is hindsight thinking that's taking place. What else could we have played around with? We could have done more blocky masses of the trees here. We could have used that more tonalist approach, which might be the next step, something like that to play around with. So there's a lot that can be done from this, but I hope that this offered some insight and some learning with it. So I'll put a mat on top and we'll sign it, and we'll call it a day. Also, this is a good example of the ability of Pthalo Blue, adding it to the Ron Ransom palette. Where did my mat cover go? There we go. So we'll put this on here, I'll sign, and we'll take a picture. I highly recommend getting a mat to look at your paintings under. It kind of lets you see how it would be displayed. Also, taping off edges helps as well. But just know that that mat will be pretty brutalized with, you know, catching paint underneath and whatnot. But all right, there's the results. A whole bunch of links below. I got the Patreon account. Have the Etsy link and whatnot. If there's anything you're ever interested in, please give it a check out. Please like, subscribe, etc. All right, hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.